Olá pessoal, bonjour à tous et à toutes. Hello everyone. I'm really happy to start this live here today with Daniela, which is somebody that I respect her a lot, and I don't know if she knows how much she taught me. And mostly, when she started doing this, I was like, I didn't even know what design was. So I think it's pretty amazing to have someone with her knowledge, skills, and baggage here to share a little bit with us. So thank you so much for your time with us, Daniela. And for those who don't know Daniela, she is currently the global vice president of design and research at PayPal, but she was also already vice president of design at Yahoo, if I'm not mistaken, at eBay. She worked at Kodak at the beginning of her career, at Intuit, which is all the companies that everybody in the world knows and that made or are making difference in people's lives, such as of course AT&T, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm really happy to have you here among us. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Thiago. Olá a todos. Hi, everyone. And Thiago, you're selling yourself short. I had the pleasure of working with you earlier in your career and have had the immense pleasure of actually watching your trajectory and your journey with so much pride, but no surprise because you were already a very talented designer when we worked together, what, a decade ago or so?
Thank you so much for that. Yeah, at Get Ninja is actually a really cool startup that I worked for. Shout out to Eduardo. Actually, there's a funny story. I don't know if I've ever told. I don't know if you know about this actually. Um, when before actually we start working together. For those at home, the context was I imagine yourself getting at work, and I was like working this startup called Get Ninjas, and the CEO comes to you and say, "Hey man, I'd like to talk with you." And I was like, "Yeah, sure. Can we take a coffee or something like that?" And I was like, "Oh, okay, he's gonna fire me. Okay, no worries. I can live with that." So we sat at the table, and he was like, "So I'd like to tell you something, but I don't want you to feel hurt. I don't want you to feel upset about it." And now, okay, please tell me what's happening. And he was like, "We're having somebody advising us on design matters for UX, for design, and stuff like that." And I was like, "But that's cool. Who's the person? Can I get to know her or him?" He was like, "Yeah, sure, it's Daniela." And I went looking at your LinkedIn, and I was like, "What? She? Oh, of course. When can we start?" And you're not mad? And I no. I mean, she's like a badass designer, and she's like a major senior leader in the field. Of course. And when's our first call together? How can we make the happen fast? He was like, "Oh, jeez, you designers, you have the ego so high that I thought you were going to be like crazy mad about me on doing this, but as I can see you were happy, let's get started." And I was like, and that day I went home so relieved because I was like, "Oh, that would be really great." So thank you for that. I don't know if you knew that story.
No, thank you. So I knew he was worried about what it would mean for you. And honestly, that was one of the reasons why I was comfortable and agreed to do it, because the fact that the CEO actually cared about his designer, I think says a lot, right? We don't necessarily always get, I think, that level of care and respect.
Yeah,
And people don't always realize what it can mean. So that I think said a lot about Eduardo and about how he felt about you as well.
that's really true. Awesome. So that I think it's a great transition to the start of our discussion, because I think the first thing I like you to talk about is how it is to be the VP of design, the global VP of design in a company such as PayPal, because that shows a lot on how design is important for them. And I'd love you to develop a little bit about that, and then we can start doing some questions for the audience as well. So if you have somebody in the chat, if you have any questions, please, you can ask in Portuguese, you can ask in French, and I'll do the translation here if needed. Okay. So how does it feel, Daniela? Please.
So it's a really good question. I think that the thing that I enjoy the most for me is just the variety of projects that I get to participate in. So when you're looking horizontally and looking across, I'm context switching all of the time. So I'm, going and looking at a project that what we might be doing for large enterprises, so large retailers that use PayPal. And then in the next hour, I'm now reviewing a project that's for P2P or peer-to-peer payments with PayPal. So that level of context switching, but then figuring out how to connect the dots, which I always say is my primary responsibility and is what I always tell my team, which is that if we are to be centralized like we are at PayPal, our primary responsibility is to make sure that we're thinking end to end, that we're breaking down those silos, that we're connecting dots from teams that may not realize that they should be collaborating, that they should be talking to each other, that they should be thinking about the customer experience, from a much more holistic standpoint. So a lot of what I do is connecting those dots and sitting in design reviews and actually saying, hi, you need to talk to this team because they're doing XYZ. And I think we really need to consider that in the context of also what you're doing. So there's a lot that goes into that. There's obviously a lot that goes into figuring out how to build a strong community, how to have a sense of culture for design, how to have a sense of culture in the company for design. So not just within the design organization, but how do we make sure that everyone in the company appreciates good user experience, that everyone is customer centric. My first 2 years at PayPal, one of my primary charters was actually to help PayPal be more customer centric. So how do we bring in getting everyone close to the customer, making sure that everyone is prioritizing speaking to customers, getting those insights, and really leading decisions based on customer data and customer insights, as opposed to just personal opinions, executive opinions. And so it's the job is quite varied. You get involved in things like company transformation. When we were back in offices, I got involved in actually redesigning our physical workspaces and figuring out, what that could look like and what that might mean, and applying design principles to almost build prototypes of our physical spaces and actually learning from those before we completely remodeled one of our buildings. So it's quite varied in terms of everything that I get to participate in, which is what I enjoy.
Oh, that's really awesome. I really like what you said about designing stuff, right? So not just designing the interfaces that the users are going to use, but also designing the organization, designing the workplace, and designing whatever we can apply actually the design principles into, so we can better figure out upfront what are the things that may be well, or are the things that we should improve upfront. So that's really awesome, and that connects a little bit with when you talked about design culture and how to create this user-centric culture inside the company, from a company that sometimes doesn't have this in place. So what are the challenges you had on your career while developing that, and what were the actions you did actually to make it right from your point?
So I think one of the biggest challenges is that oftentimes companies feel that they already know their customers, right? And we, I think, coming from a design and research perspective, we're like, well, you think you know your customers, or you only know your customers in relation to our products. You don't really fully understand the customer's overall context, their workflows, and everything else that you need to consider when building solutions. So I think that that's usually the biggest barrier, is to really open people's minds and help them realize that they don't know their customers as well as they could. So I use a very simple exercise that I learned from a researcher at Intuit. Her name is Wendy Kesselman. She's doing consulting now. And it's called FOG,
Fog.
and FOG. So if you look up Wendy Kesselman and FOG, you may be able to come across some of the articles where she explains this. And FOG stands for facts. The O is for observations or opinions, and then the G is for guesses. So facts is obviously something that's backed by data. The O would be something like, I heard someone tell me once that they saw a customer do X, or maybe I heard once from a customer. So it's sort of like you think it's accurate, but you don't have all of the evidence behind it. The G is obviously just a guess. So we use this exercise a lot, and it was extremely effective for teams that felt that they already knew everything that they needed to know about the customers. And what you do is you basically bring everyone into a room or into a call, and you ask them to write down on post-its what they know about customers. Then you have them classify each of those knowledge items into, a fact, an observation, or an opinion, and a guess. And then cluster, and teams are usually very surprised by how little they actually have in the facts column. So at the beginning, when we were going into this customer centric journey at PayPal, we did this. There's an annual VP conference where all of the VPs and above come together, and we actually did it, but based on a segment. So we picked digital natives as a segment, and we had the VPs write down everything they knew about digital natives. And then do this clustering. And it was, again, one of those eye-opening exercises where they realized how little they knew, but how much they assumed, right? Which is the whole power behind this exercise. And then, of course, the next step is you can then use your cluster of O's and G's to go create a learning plan and go, learn more. But I think it's really getting to that awareness of what people don't know that helps you get to customer centricity.
Oh, that's really awesome. And I think it's amazing because sometimes this may also open up space for research, right? So out of this
Absolutely.
FOG posted that are classified as facts, but actually how do we know that? And
Yeah.
when we understand that it's just like more than a guess than a fact, we can also tailor some research towards that to have a glance if, oh, what is the impact of the thing that I thought was a fact but actually is more of a guess, right? So did you have any kind of outcomes like this one?
We do. So we then usually use this to inform what we call a universal learning plan. So this is something else that we have implemented. So at PayPal, and most large companies, you will find that there are different customer insights teams. So we have market research, we have user research, which sits with design. We have product marketing managers who also do research, especially locally in the markets. And then we have product analytics. We have our customer support team, which also will have insights from a completely different lens, right? But very important insights. So one of the things that we've started doing is bringing all of these customer insights together. They meet with a cross-functional team of product design, engineering, etc. And they ask, what are all the questions that you have, right? What are all the questions that need answering? What are the hypotheses that you might have? And let's develop a learning plan that each one of these customer insights teams can help fulfill. So it's really thinking about, right, research as a means of answering questions, validating hypotheses, testing solutions, and each one of those teams playing a different role. And it's a living document, so you may have a kickoff and then you keep updating that living document, because the more you might do research, the more questions might emerge, right? And the more you ideate, more questions might emerge. So having this learning plan has been a really, really helpful tool in that regard.
Oh, that's pretty interesting because actually you can have this team that is in charge of a given product or a given area of a given part of the experience, maybe end to end always, but
Yeah.
and have them being the center or the connectors for this whole exercise, and having people coming over and then they could figure out what to do and then present for this crowd or this audience what were the results out of the session. Oh, that's pretty amazing. Do you have
It,
any other tool like this that you'd like to share with us?
I think the other thing, just to build on what you were sharing, which is something that I learned at Intuit, Intuit, obviously very customer centric company, which is that you have to make sure that so if you're a research team, you have to make sure that the team that you're working with is included in that journey. So at Intuit, we would include everyone on the team, right? The engineer, the product manager, the designer, everyone was actually included in research. When we would do a follow me to the office to watch small business owners, the whole team would actually be included. When we had lab testing, the whole team would be included. But even more importantly, it was doing real-time debriefing. So it wasn't this notion of the researcher goes off, they do the research, they come back with a report, and then they try to do a readout. The team is all like, what are you talking about? I don't believe that. The customers that you talk to are dumb. Right? So there's that sort of like immediate rejection of all of the findings. So by including them, but also debriefing after each customer session, you're bringing the whole team along, you're giving them ownership over what it is that they're learning from the session. So the best researchers I have worked with are really good at doing that debrief. They're really good at getting teams to actually do the so what, right? So what did we see? What did we observe? What were some takeaways? So what does that mean for how we're thinking about this concept, for how we're thinking about the solution, and getting the team to almost real time start thinking through it and brainstorming it? We find that it leads to much better ownership over, those insights than if you have more of a over the wall kind of, here's the report, let me do a formal readout for you.
And that's all about breaking the silos, right? So how can we,
Exactly.
maybe we're not breaking, but how can we connect the silos so they can have some interactions between them that are pretty interesting and smart? Oh, that's so cool. And because this is also something that when we take a read of, I don't know, design sprint, Friday on design sprint is all about that, right? So user testing, but not testing by yourself. You have like a camera pointing to the user and
Yeah.
a room full of people noting the positive parts, the ideas, and the negative parts of whatever you're testing. So that's basically it, right? So
That's exactly it. That's
oh,
exactly it. Yeah.
awesome. And how, because what I see from the most part of the business, the regular business that are not design driven yet, the majority of companies today. I was taking a look at the video you made with Fabricio Gore, talking about the
Mm-hmm.
study at McKinsey, uh, where companies are struggling to figure out design, to figure out that design is not just the pretty things, how to make things pretty and green or blue and stuff like that, but also to bring back results, business results, and customer satisfaction, right? In an agile and a short cycle. So the question here would be, what is your actions at this at the level that you are today to put and to help and to create some inputs for the resistance of the stakeholders or product managers or executives that doesn't quite get the importance of design, and what is the driver that you use actually to break this little wall and make room for learning and for this transformation actually that design can bring to the table?
Yep. So it's you spoke about it, which is it has to be tied to business results. So when I think about, I've had the benefit of primarily working in tech companies that already understand the value of design. AT&T was obviously different, right? A much more traditional company. Now they understood conceptually the value of design. That's why they created a VP level role, and that's how I ended up there. So the CTO at the company really understood and he got it, but not everyone else did, and especially not the folks in the business units who tended to work a little bit more in a traditional way. So it really becomes important to speak their language, and I think to develop some of those proof points. Um, as an example, AT&T was very ops review driven. So teams would come in with their dashboards, their metrics, how were things going. So I plugged into that approach instead of actually, leading much more from a design approach. I was like, okay, so we're going to actually have dashboards for all of our customer flows, and we're going to measure how they're doing, and we're going to list the top 10 usability issues and the top 10 customer support issues for paying a bill, for instance, or buying a new phone. We're going to take dashboard per dashboard, and each of the teams that owns those is going to come in. They're going to share their dashboards of all the metrics. More importantly, they're going to tell us what is the dashboard telling them as far as user experience opportunities, and then what are they doing about it. So dashboards, ops reviews, right? That's something that they know how to do with their eyes closed. Everyone is like, that sounds great. We can totally do it. But by building that muscle, they started to see that when they would look at all of these holistic metrics and inputs, and they were identifying user experience issues, and they would make a change that would directly translate into better conversion, into call deflection, or whatever business metric that they were concerned about, right? And immediately they're like, okay, what else can we do, right? This is amazing magic sauce that all of a sudden is helping drive our business metrics. But I had to approach it that way, as opposed to, in other companies where sharing customer videos and really trying to get to that empathy lever might be very effective. That wouldn't have worked at AT&T, or at least not at first. We really needed to start from where they were. Same in terms of, for instance, driving a design system and design patterns. I led with the efficiency message as opposed to the customer consistency message, because I knew that efficiency was going to resonate more with them. So you really have to understand what the business values, and I think plug into that to make your way in. And then when you do and you start getting proof points, it becomes a lot easier, I think, to get support.
That's awesome. I think it's really good to transit from that. I have my fingers at the screen because I'm taking a bunch of notes, so don't mind my finger, guys.
I didn't even notice.
Sorry, yeah. But I like how it connects with a business agility, right? So, because if we take a look at frameworks like Lean Kanban, which usually we have UX complaining and saying, oh, Agile is not for designers. And the first principle of it is start with what you do now. So actually, it's the same principle that you were bringing and saying, okay, see what works from this specific reality, and how to challenge and to put some design thoughts inside of it, and just make us visualize actually the impacts for the user and stuff like that. Is that something somehow related?
I think it is. I think it is. I think it goes back to also just change, right? And change management, which is something that I think over the years I've developed, and but still have to remind myself that you have to tackle that kind of transformation in small chunks, which is obviously very related to Agile, right? So you may have a vision, and I will have a vision of that end state and where I want to get to, but I know that I'm not going to be able to actually build that end state from day one. It has to be about what are the smaller chunks and what is the sequencing of that smaller chunk that's actually going to get me to that vision, and having that patience of actually trying things, seeing what works, right, and then continuing to build on it. So which I think is actually something that's a little bit hard often for design leaders,
Yeah.
because we can envision the end state so easily, but then and so we get impatient and we want to get there, and we're like, why aren't people already getting it and letting me get to that end state? But when you're dealing with humans, and with having to have them get on the bus and actually believe you have to go in small steps. So I do think that there's some parallels to Agile.
Well, that's really cool because we thought a lot about slice the problem, right, and not the
Yeah.
solution. So it's exactly what you're saying about having these smaller chunks that are parts of our incrementals that we're going to deliver until building up this final vision. Why do you think for companies like the homes that are not design driven so far, why do you think it feels so counterintuitive for them? Because when we take a look at as exactly what we're talking about, putting things up in small steps, uh, um, why do you think this feels so counterintuitive and makes them like want to build this entire plan for 5 years and actually slicing the solution, saying, "Oh, we're gonna put up first all the backend and all the infrastructure. Then we're gonna add something in the middle, and in 3 years we'll start working on the front part, and people will actually be able to see, and just then we'll be able to be this." Fail fast, learn faster kind of company. Why do you think this is so counterintuitive and we are like struggling with that?
It's a good question. I don't know that I know the answer. I do think that sometimes scale can be, right, the what gets in the way.
Yeah.
So if you think, again, you've worked at startups, I haven't. So it'll be interesting to hear your thought. A startup isn't already starting from that place of scale and that high risk of having just stuff go wrong, right? When you're dealing with like a very large user base. So I think that those companies will try to architect everything in terms of avoiding risk and also already thinking from like this massive scale from the very beginning, which I think will then lead to exactly what you described. But I don't know if that's accurate. I would be curious to hear from you if you think that might be one of the reasons and what else you see.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I fully agree with you. I think there is fear, lack of trust, right? Which
Yeah,
leads to, oh, we should get rid of all the risks. And the way we know of getting rid of all the risks is planning each detail and spend 8 months planning for something before just doing it, testing it, putting it out there, and see how it goes. So I think it's you have really, in startup we don't have this kind of mindset because we cannot do the already we don't have like 18 months to think, right?
yeah,
It's either maximum 3 months, depending of the state of the startup. But if you don't come up with results in 3 or 6 months, maybe the next round of investment or funding will be not there, right? So you have to find some other job or think on another idea. So I think there's this traction thing that if we miss
yeah,
something for startups, right? The risk is if we do something wrong this week, next week we won't have any audience. Uh,
exactly.
so I think that's more related to that. And big companies, there are companies where we say that money is it's infinite, so money never ends because we always have money coming, no matter what we are doing for the next 10 years. We will still have positive revenue. But when you take a look, a zoom out, how we are growing or not from this 10-year perspective, then you start to see, oh, so maybe in 20 years we won't be here anymore, you know. So I think that's trust, fear, and risk. How we deal with risk is actually that is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. No, it's the isn't it the boiled frog syndrome, right? It's that sense of actually not being able to look far down the horizon enough.
Exactly.
But yeah,
Awesome. I'm gonna transit to questions from the audience now because otherwise I would be like talking with you for the whole time, and which would be a pleasure
sounds
for
good.
me. But let's say we have one question here from Elise saying what she has to say about the so-called UX designer bubble. Will it burst, or will UX design really succeed as a fundamental business strategy? I think we talked a little bit about that, but what do you think about it?
So I obviously don't think that it will burst. I think it will evolve though. So when I think about, when I've been doing UX design now for, it's scary to actually try and calculate, 24 years.
Holy.
Um, so, we're still here, and if anything, we matter more than ever than what we did 24 years ago. But we've evolved, and I think we'll just have to continue to evolve. And I think tying back to what you were talking about, the more traditional companies, I think what's important is for our community not to get too comfortable and not realize how business is changing around us, how needs are changing around us, and continue to evolve. That's how you continue to stay relevant. So, what do you think, Thiago? I'm curious to.
I fully agree with you. I think the UX designers bubble. I don't think that will burst. I really agree with Tim Brown when he's saying that design is so important to be left just for designers. So
Yeah,
I think it will expand actually and have other non-designers joining the band and start thinking as designers because the visual part is becoming so easy to do, right? We have several tools, several design systems that are open source that are making it easier to create beautiful interfaces. Yeah. However, when you get a chance to test whatever you created, that's when you learn that, oh, okay, it's beautiful, but nobody gets it. I'm the only one. So what should I change? And I think this will make. I think product owners are starting to get on this journey, right? Where when they are working a lot with product designers and collaborating a lot. So I think it won't burst. I think it will expand actually, and will be because good designers are all about inclusion, right? So if we see somebody trying to do some design related work, instead of going there and say, I am the designer, say, hey, let's do that together. Maybe I can learn something for you and you can learn
yeah,
something for me. So I fully agree with you, and I think it's only going to. It's not a bubble actually, and we shouldn't see it as a bubble, and more like as a trend and an idea or a principle for good business, right?
Yeah, no, I
So
agree.
cool. There's another question here from Ramos. I don't know how to K Ramos, Caroline Ramos, maybe. What are the discovery process that you guys at PayPal practice?
So it's fairly traditional, I would say, or maybe what I should say is, we have the full toolkit of discovery approaches, and we then tailor it to whatever project it is that we're supporting or area that we're trying to research based on that learning plan that I mentioned earlier. But we definitely have market research and the product marketing team. They start early on trying to uncover needs, customer needs, trying to uncover it from a global perspective. So when you work at a global company, what's really important is to make sure that you're thinking about at least a few representative markets or maybe some extreme markets, right? And trying to uncover those common themes because we only build global products. And then we might tailor and customize sort of, the last mile or 5 miles, but we have to build global products at their core. So we might work with product marketing managers and with market research to really help identify the opportunities. And then the user research team might do different kinds of you know research early on to understand customers' mental models, their workflows, jobs to be done. So it really will depend on the context. If we're looking at a small business owner, for instance, we might do something more comprehensive like jobs to be done and really understanding roles, the different roles that people might play within a business, their workflows, how work actually gets done, their full context, how they get things shipped to a customer, which PayPal may play a very small role in, but it's important to understand all of those jobs. And then a lot of concept testing. So that's probably where we spend the bulk of our time is in iterative testing, concept testing, a little bit of, more regimented usability testing. When we were back in the office for some projects, we would even do things like eye tracking, etc. And then we're also now adding UX metrics. So we're starting to measure live products because the majority of our research work was all focused on work in process, not so much on live products that we may not be touching. So we're also starting to look at that as part of that full life cycle so that it can feed back into the roadmap.
Whoa, lots of learnings. I think I'm gonna go back to after to this question and listen it like 3 or 4 times again because it's lots of great things on there that we could spend an entire stream just talking about it. But I'm gonna move on with the questions because there are some things that are connecting really good with this because there are some kinds of Arielle actually she asked really what are the kind of profile that you guys are looking for the design team and how do you see working remote, working from home,
Mm-hmm.
and if you guys have lots of immigrants in the team.
So our profiles on the design side, we primarily hire product designers, hybrid, T-shaped designers, whatever label you want to assign to it. But generally, it is more of the hybrid designers. And it's a funding issue, right? So it's really hard, and it was one of the things that I think is tough about our industry, which is to have specialists, and all of a sudden, every time I'm staffing a project, to actually say, okay, so you're going to need an interaction designer, a visual designer, a researcher, a content writer, maybe a prototyper, right? So it's 5 people per project. It's not scalable. So we had to pivot to hiring much more product designers. Now, in some cases, those product designers may have their the depth or the specialty might be service design, or maybe it's design system design. So some are more generalists and some may have specialties. It depends on what they're being hired for. But aside from the design skills, which obviously is table stakes, right? They need to be there or we wouldn't hire someone. We really look at individuals who can model our key mindsets. And we have 5 mindsets that we have built into a playbook for PayPal design. So the five are customer centric. We've talked a lot about this already. Curiosity. So this is all about, right, exploring what if, why not, what could it be, exploring and considering multiple solutions, not just going for the default and going really deep into one. So really being curious in terms of the solution set, having an outside in mindset. So really being able to look at a problem from different perspectives, looking at competitors, not looking at things from just a PayPal centric way, or just from whatever product or piece of the product that they're working on. Continuous assessment. We just talked about this when we talked about discovery, right? How can you actually continuously assess your work? And then the last one is thinking end to end, which we've also touched on, and is really thinking about a full customer journey, not just, if their flow consists of two screens, they really need to start to think about, okay, where did the customer really start their journey and how might they end it? So we really look for those mindsets and we interview for those mindsets when we're talking to individuals. And last but not least, this is just as important, we look for people who are strong facilitative leaders, strong collaborators. They can bring others in the journey. They can harness the best ideas from everyone on the team, right? They don't have to be the only one coming up with good ideas. So it's those soft skills I think are just as important as the design skills.
Awesome.
The next question was working from home. I think there were several questions in
Yeah,
that one question. So
yeah.
So we've all been working from home since March at PayPal. We tended to be a very co-located company, so we had designers usually in the same physical location as product and engineering, but have made a somewhat smooth transition to working from home. Being in the same time zone, I think, helps with that. So and then who knows what the future will hold. In very few cases, we have remote roles, but there's not too many of those. Again, I don't know if as a company we'll decide otherwise, given the current situation. And then the last question is, we have many, many immigrants on the team from all over the world. Sadly, given recent US visa policy changes, we are much more constrained, and we've only been able to hire visa holders that are actually already in the US. So less so, I would say, in our recent hires.
And that's a reality for every company in the US, right? Not just
Yeah.
for you guys. Yeah, we had our Luca from Axios here a few weeks ago, and it was the same. So hopefully it will change soon. But
I hope so.
yeah, there's a really great comment here which connects with the soft skills you were talking about. But before, I would like to read what this girl told you. Her name is Maida Alaska, and she said, Daniela, when I see a woman as talented as yourself in a position of leadership, I say thank you. First, because it shows for people like myself that it's possible. If you were to say, what is the most important soft skill to become a design leader? What would it be?
Thank you so much for that comment. That was really nice. So I think if I had to pick just one skill, I think it's the ability to inspire others, right? And that's, again, the magic that we all have as designers, as researchers, as individuals who are more creative. Now, I'm not necessarily a visionary leader, and I don't feel like I need to be the sole creator of a vision, but I need to be that storyteller, and I need to get others to believe in what could be. And I think that that's what we do, as whether you're a design practitioner or whether you're a leader. So it's really about inspiring others. It's about inspiring them to become customer centric, to develop empathy, to imagine, what it could be, and to get behind that vision. So I think inspiring others is probably the primary skill.
Awesome. I fully agree with that. Fully agree with that. I'm reading some other questions because there are several questions that we have actually talked about already on our introduction. Questions about how to use research to impact business results and to impact business decisions. How to scale design, something we already discussed a little bit. But we have one question here that caught my attention, and it is from Mancone. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong, but he says, or she says, As a worldwide company, do you think there are specific behaviors per country based on cultural and local habits? If so, how do you take this into account in your design process? I think you talked a little bit about that already, but if you could expand a little bit on that, it would be great.
So I think that there are, right? And it probably isn't what I'm going to share isn't new for anyone who might be working on global products. Um, like I said, we usually focus a little bit more on items like regulation or how payments might work. You know, for instance, in Brazil, we had to build boletos. We don't have boletos anywhere else in the world, but so we tend to focus more on those items from that are market specific. But there are behaviors that are different. You know, an example would be we know from research that German users usually will read all of the copy on the screen, and we know that the majority of the rest of the world won't. So what we do, because again, we're building global products, we're then translating and adapting content. We can't necessarily have, you know, one set of content for Germany, one for the rest of the world. So we have to actually build for the majority and make sure that we are very direct and to the point with our copy. And then there's some other nuances that we take into account. We have a team that works in our content and globalization group, and they research whether certain terms might adapt and translate for markets, and they come back with insights that sound really obvious, you know, once they're shared, but there are things that companies sometimes ignore. For instance, in India, using a shopping cart as the icon for cart doesn't necessarily resonate. They don't use shopping carts when shopping.
Yeah.
So yes, of course, if you're dealing with global Indians who are pretty used to using global products, they've already learned that. But if you're developing something that's very specific to perhaps more remote areas of India, using a shopping cart isn't going to be a recognized symbol. So there's nuances like that we will take into account and adapt and customize. But that's why it's so important, I think, to the global research, because otherwise you will inadvertently create you know, designs that may not even be usable in certain markets.
And what I think is really the great challenge working. Imagine you're in the US designing something for Indian users. The level of empathy that you should have, because probably you guys will be outsourcing all the research or user interviews or every deep in-depth knowledge that you are grabbing is coming from probably a local partner that gets to speak in the local language with people, and then there's that the talent of this team to reduce the amount of noise in the message, because this I think right, if I'm wrong, please correct me, but I think it's in these scenarios, it's something related to the old school way of doing, where we have this research package that get home in a certain part, and we have somebody presenting it for us, because otherwise wouldn't be possible actually to make it happen, because you have to talk only with people from the country that speaks your language. There are some gestures that you won't understand and something like that. So uh, does this happen, or am I kind of tripping here?
So yes, and we also have the luxury of being able to rely on our product marketing managers who happen to be in all of our key markets. So they
Okay.
usually will either lead the local research for us. So they might work with a user researcher on the protocol to make sure that the protocol is consistent across all of the markets that we're researching. But then they will be the ones asking the questions in the local language and doing the translation. Pre-pandemic, we used to oftentimes actually have teams also travel globally, because to your point, there's nothing like actually seeing it firsthand. I have an amazing story that it was again one of those teams that came back changed after doing local research. So we PayPal owns a product called Zoom with an X, not the video conferencing tool that we're in, which is for sending money. So I can send money to people in Brazil using Zoom, and you know, to many areas around the globe. So we always looked at the people sending money. We never really researched the people receiving, because they weren't our direct customers. But we decided to look at the receiving experience, and we sent a team. It was a team of engineers, product managers, et cetera, from the US to Mexico. So they went to remote areas of Mexico to look at what it was like to receive money. And I'll never forget this video. So it's a young mom. She's holding her baby. This will resonate for folks that are in Brazil. So she's holding her baby. She's in this remote area, no asphalt, right? Just dirt road. And they're asking her, so what is it like when your uncle sends you, the monthly money for your family? How do you pick up the money? And she said, so I walk, 2 kilometers to take the bus into town. And then, I take this 90-minute bus that goes into town. And when I get into town, they tell me that they've run out of cash for the day to come back tomorrow.
Oh,
And the team is like, what? And then what? And she's like, yeah. And then I go back tomorrow. And, and they're like, how many times do you have to do this? And she said, sometimes it's 4 or 5 times that I have to make that trip because the little store that's the one that receives the money and gives it to users has run out of money, right? And I remember watching the video, and I remember watching the video of the interviewers and then of the translators, and all of these Americans were, eyes wide open. It never would have crossed their mind that that could be someone's reality and what they had to go through to receive the money that their uncle had sent them from the US. So you can just imagine that team came back, and their level of motivation to solve that issue and to make it easier, right? For her name was Maria, for Maria to actually pick up the money was sky high. They locked themselves in a room. They're like, we're not leaving here until we actually solve that problem. So you can't always, I think, replace, to your point, that firsthand, I think, view, even if it is in a different language and you have to use translators. Sometimes I think it does require being there in person for the team to get that level of motivation.
oh, even I got motivated by that story, because oh, Jesus, imagine. And this is awesome because there's a recent article from Jared Spool saying exactly that, right? Expose their team to real users,
Yeah,
and this is, I think, is the best story of the positive outcome that comes from teams getting exposed to the users. Awesome,
exactly.
awesome, awesome, awesome. I have a question from Simon Lassalle here, somebody from the French team here. Uh, do you use any tool to gather and share the data collected with your teams? Something like a database for research that allow teams to look for previous researches? If not, how do you keep your data?
It's an excellent question. It's something that we've struggled with for many years. As you know, and just to double click on it, the issue typically is a team like the one that I just described that did this amazing body of research. That research will then end up just sitting with that team, right? So whatever team is commissioning or conducting the research, they will have that knowledge, but then other teams that come across that problem space may not be aware of it. So I think this is a really common problem in companies, and especially the larger the company gets, the worse it gets.
Yeah.
So we invested in a solution that we built out last year. The tool is called Sharper without an E. So and it's basically a natural language search tool. It does require our PMMs, which are the product marketing managers, market research, user research, to upload their reports into this repository. But then you can go in and you can actually search, and you could say, I want to see everything that has been done for digital natives in Germany. And it will find all of the reports that have been tagged or that might have those terms in the actual report. So it has been a really good addition to our toolkit so that teams can actually start with that as a starting point. We do, in our discovery process, we start with foundational research, which is, again, understanding what do we already know, what do we already have. And then, as we talked about with the FOG exercise, figuring out where do we have gaps in our knowledge and building a learning plan from that.
Cool. Awesome. 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 And I think that connects also with you already talked a little bit about that, but talking about UX metrics and how are you guys applying that on your daily basis? Could you expand just a little bit on that, if you will, please?
Yes, so that's a bit emerging for us here. We're still figuring out all of the metrics that we want to collect in order to measure our user experience. But we're looking at a few different items. Again, none of them are going to be new to anyone here. So we're looking at, does the product solve a need is it useful? Is the utility there? Is it usable? And then just looking at traditional usability metrics, and then looking at some sort of sentiment metric, whether it's satisfaction or different types. And we're experimenting with a few approaches there, and then really taking our primary flows and measuring those from across all of those dimensions. So some of it obviously will need to be with, through research where we can observe customers, we can time them, we can see if they're making errors, we can augment that with analytics. Some of it will have to be self-reported, survey data. For instance, is the product really useful? Is it meeting your needs? And then obviously on the satisfaction front, that will also be survey based. So we have now a UX metrics lead, and he's putting together this framework, and then we're going to start measuring our key flows. And then more importantly, seeing how the results can then be leveraged to impact roadmap decisions, right? So depending on how each of these flows are doing, can we impact decisions to make sure that we prioritize fixing existing stuff as opposed to just building new stuff, which can be very tempting and common as well for companies.
That's really true. Again, quoting Jared Spool, I don't know if that's because he was in the channel a while ago, but I've been like reading everything that he's putting out there. I was already before, but now
I do
even
too.
more.
Yes.
So yeah, we're like to that. So, but he was saying there's a conference that he does and say, please, a company. I'm not going to quote the company. Stop building new stuff. Just fix the current bugs that you guys have,
Yeah.
and CSAT will be through the roof. And that's exactly what you said. Do you guys have some I don't know, some ritual or some strategy actually to deal with it? Because I mean, the metrics can help us solving that, but what else do you guys maybe doing towards this matter?
So we don't yet. One of the things that we're also starting here at PayPal is similar to what I described at AT&T, which is a product health dashboard. So to help inform that and to help prioritize it. I've started talking about it as UX debt. We talk a lot about tech debt, right? And companies will actually prioritize that. So I'm like, I'm just going to borrow that term, because when it's something that's already familiar to people, they'll be able to understand it more easily. So we're hoping that by actually having it be data backed and being able to pinpoint areas where we have those opportunities, and then like we talked earlier, being able to show, okay, every time we go in and fix existing stuff, look at how it's helping with conversion, look at how it's helping with these other metrics. I feel like it just becomes that cycle of people saying, okay, what else can we fix? Right? What other things, what other broken windows do we have that if we go and fix them, we'll be able to actually get good business results without having to invest in that new stuff.
Awesome, perfect. We are approaching the end of this stream, and I could be, because lunchtime in Brazil it's getting over already, so people should become and go back to work. But I'd like to have one last question, if it's okay for you, and it's a tricky one because it is the anti-pattern kind of question that I like to do. It's like, is there something related to design leadership that we didn't talk about today and you'd like to highlight, in a way?
It's a really good question. I think the one thing that I wish we as an industry and as a community would stop over focusing on is how important we think we are and how important it is for others to know how important we are. I'm a big believer that if we just show up and we do awesome work, we become indispensable. And I feel like sometimes we just do too much navel gazing and we worry too much about that validation. And the validation is not necessarily based on actual value, right? That's what I always tell my team, which is like, stop obsessing over whether or not people really get design or value design. It's like, just start practicing design and doing design and bringing them along. And next thing you know, they won't be able to have a meeting without you there. And invariably that's true. So So that's the one thing we have, like this complex of inferiority, and I think we're always trying to compensate for it by wanting others to validate us. It's like get that out of your head. It's a distraction. It's not going to help you get the validation that you want. Just go do awesome work, and the validation will come.
Awesome, awesome. There's the video. I think there's a video that I talk about workshops and how to design and run workshops. That one of the tips is exactly that you are not special. It is not about you. You're just someone that has some skills to make it easier maybe for others. But you're not special. Everybody's special. We special to
Yes.
the potential of a group is more than the sum of each individual, right? So I think that's a really great way of ending this, and thanking you so much for being here this morning for you, this evening for me, and this lunchtime for Brazilians. And the doors of our small but really warm channel is always open for you. Whatever you feel like talking about, please, I'd be more than happy to have you here.
Thank you, Thiago. Obrigado a todos, and good night, or have a good afternoon, everyone.
Bye, thank you so much.
Bye bye. Ciao.
Tchau. Eu vou só fechar aqui.